I found her alive. I watched my thermal camera track her for 3 minutes. Then I was ordered to file a report saying she was dead. November 18, 2023. Search and rescue helicopter pilot out of Fairbanks, 34 years old, 8 years flying medevac and SAR missions across interior Alaska. I have pulled bodies from the Tanana River. I have located lost hunters in whiteout blizzards. I have transported dying patients through weather that grounded every other aircraft in the state. But I have never been ordered to abandon an active search when the missing person was located and still moving. Emily Hartman, 26 years old, graduate student from Seattle. Solo hiker reported missing on November 16 after failing to return from a day hike near Naa Hút Springs. Last seen at 2 in the afternoon by another hiker on Granite Tourist Trail. Temperature that day was -42 degrees. She carried minimal gear. No overnight equipment, no emergency shelter, light jacket, no gloves. The kind of setup that kills chichacos every season. By the time her boyfriend reported her missing at 10 that night, she had been exposed to lethal cold for 8 hours. Search and rescue protocols said we had maybe 12 hours before hypothermia became irreversible. After 24 hours, we would be looking for a body. I am former Army. For years as a medic, before I moved to Alaska and learned to fly. I know what extreme cold does to human tissue. I know the timeline. Core temperature drops 1 degree per hour in those conditions. At 95 degrees, you lose fine motor control. At 90 degrees, you lose consciousness. At 85 degrees, your heart stops. Emily had been out there 48 hours by the time I launched my search. The math was simple and brutal. She should have been a frozen corpse. But search and rescue does not give up easily. Families need closure. Sometimes people dig snow caves. Sometimes miracles happen in the bush. I launched at first light on November 18th, 6 in the morning. Temperature had dropped overnight to -44. No wind, clear sky. The kind of cold that makes your breath freeze mid-air and fall as ice crystals. My Bell 407 was equipped with military-grade FLIR thermal imaging, forward-looking infrared, essential for SAR work in Alaska, where missing persons are often buried under snow or hidden by dense spruce forest. The equipment works by detecting heat signatures. Living things show up as bright orange and red against the blue-black background of frozen landscape. A moose registers at about 900 pounds of thermal mass. A human shows around 150 pounds. The system can detect a living person through tree cover from 2,000 feet altitude. I flew a standard grid pattern over the Granite Tours area. The terrain is rough. Granite outcrops jutting from boreal forest. Steep valleys, dense undergrowth, no trails once you leave the main path. Easy to get lost, easy to die, mile by mile, back and forth. My thermal display showed the usual signatures. A moose bedded down in willows, 3 caribou moving along a ridgeline, a fox den radiating warmth from underground, the small bright spots of ptarmigan huddled together. Living things trying to survive interior winter. I had been searching for 3 hours when something caught my attention. Not a signature yet, just an absence. A section of forest where nothing was moving. No small animals, no birds. Like everything had cleared out. In the bush, that means predator. Usually a bear, though they should have been denned up by mid-November. Sometimes a wolf pack. But wolves do not create dead zones that large. I circled lower, dropped to 800 feet. The thermal display showed normal forest temperature, no heat signatures, just frozen spruce and the blue-black cold of undisturbed wilderness. Then, at 9:47 in the morning, 2 signatures appeared on my screen. One was human-sized, small, maybe 130 pounds based on thermal output. The signature was moving but not in a walking pattern, more like being transported, carried. The other signature was massive, 8 feet tall at minimum, based on the proportions. Maybe 700 pounds of thermal mass. Bipedal, walking upright with a distinctive gait, long strides, deliberate movement. The large signature was carrying the small signature through dense forest 3 miles off any established trail. My training took over. Clinical observation, document everything. I checked my equipment. FLIR system functioning normally. GPS coordinates locking correctly. All instruments reading accurate. I keyed my radio. Search command. This is SAR-7. I have thermal visual on what appears to be missing subject, Emily Hartman. Subject is alive and being transported by unknown large bipedal figure. Current position, moving northeast at approximately 3 miles per hour. Request immediate ground team, intercept. Silence on the radio. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Long enough that I thought we had lost connection. Then search coordinator Robert Chen came on. His voice was different from the usual calm professionalism. Tight, controlled, almost mechanical. SAR-7, return to base immediately. Do not pursue target. Do not maintain visual contact. Abort search and return to base. I looked at my thermal display. The 2 signatures were still there, still moving. The small one definitely humanized. The large one carrying it with steady purpose through terrain that would stop most people. Search command. I have visual confirmation of living subject. We can intercept within minutes if we deploy ground team to current coordinates. Chen again. SAR-7. The order is non-negotiable. Return to base immediately. Do not pursue. Acknowledge order. Something in his voice told me this was not a normal protocol. This was something else. Something he had dealt with before. I circled lower. Got a better look. The thermal image was sharp, clear. A massive bipedal figure, arms longer than human proportions, moving with efficiency through forest to dense for vehicles, carrying what had to be Emily Hartman like she weighed nothing. My radio crackled again. David, this is Chen. If you do not return to base right now, your contract will be terminated effective immediately. Your flight certification will be flagged for review. You will be held personally liable for any consequences. Land now. I was watching a missing person being carried by something that should not exist, according to every official reality. And I was being ordered to pretend I saw nothing. That order came from someone who knew exactly what I was seeing on my thermal display. Someone who had protocols for this. Someone who wanted it to stay hidden. At 9:50 in the morning, I made a choice that would haunt me for 2 years. I turned my helicopter around. I followed orders. I abandoned Emily Hartman while she was still alive. But before I turned around, I gave myself 3 more minutes. 3 minutes to document what I was seeing. 3 minutes to get coordinates locked. 3 minutes to understand what was carrying Emily Hartman through wilderness that should have killed her 2 days ago. I dropped to 600 feet. Lower than standard SAR altitude, but still safe. The thermal display sharpened. Details emerged that made my hands tighten on the controls. The large figure was not just big, it was anatomically wrong for anything that should exist in Alaska. The shoulders were too broad, maybe 4 feet across. The arms hung past where knees would be on a human. The head sat forward on the neck instead of directly on top of the spine. Sagittal crest visible even on thermal imaging. A ridge running front to back across the skull like you see on male gorillas. But this was not a gorilla. Wrong proportions, wrong habitat, wrong everything. The gait was distinctly bipedal, heel-toe pattern, weight shifting from one leg to the other with practiced balance. Each stride covered maybe 6 feet. Efficient, purposeful. Moving through dense spruce and willow-like, it knew every game trail, every gap in the undergrowth. The smaller signature in its arms showed normal human thermal output. Alive, not hypothermic, not dying. After 48 hours in -44-degree cold, Emily Hartman's core temperature should have been incompatible with life, but the thermal showed her as warm as if she had been sitting by a fire. I checked my instruments again. FLIR system calibrated 2 weeks ago. GPS locked on 8 satellites. Altimeter reading accurate against known terrain. Everything functioning exactly as designed. This was not equipment malfunction. This was real biological mass moving through real forest in real time. The radio crackled. "David, I know you are still tracking. I am giving you a direct order. Break off now." Chen's voice carried weight I had not heard before. Not anger. Something closer to fear. Or maybe urgency born from protocol he was following that I did not know existed. I kept the helicopter in a slow circle. My camera was recording. Digital backup to the FLIR system. Time-stamped, coordinate tagged, evidence that could not be erased. The figure moved steadily northeast, toward the White Mountains, toward some of the most remote terrain in interior Alaska. Country where you can walk for 100 miles and never cross a road, where villages are 40 miles apart and accessible only by plane or snow machine. At 9:52, the figure stopped, set Emily down gently on a fallen log. The thermal showed her sitting upright, moving her arms, conscious, aware, not the limp deadweight of an unconscious hypothermia victim. The large figure stepped back, seemed to be checking on her, making sure she could support herself. Then it reached down and picked her up again. Cradled carry this time instead of over the shoulder. More protective, more careful. That detail struck me harder than the size or the impossible anatomy. This was not predatory behavior, not aggressive. This was caretaking. This was something protecting Emily from the cold that should have killed her. My radio exploded. "Kellerman, you have 10 seconds to acknowledge abort order, or I am grounding every aircraft in this sector and flagging your license with the FAA for insubordination during active SAR operation. Acknowledge now." I looked at my fuel gauge, still 3/4 full. I could follow these signatures for another hour, easy. Could track exactly where this thing was taking her. Could guide ground teams to intercept. But Chun's threat was real. FAA involvement meant federal investigation, meant my commercial license under review, meant potential criminal charges if they decided I had endangered the missing person by not following coordinator instructions. I had a decision to make. Career or conscience. Safety or truth. At 9:53 in the morning, I made the wrong choice. SAR 7, acknowledging abort order. Returning to base, I banked the helicopter south, away from the thermal signatures, away from Emily. My camera kept recording until the figures disappeared, beyond my sensor range at approximately 3 miles distance. Total footage, 3 minutes 14 seconds of clear thermal imaging showing a bipedal figure over 8 feet tall, carrying a human-sized heat signature through interior Alaska wilderness. The flight back took 12 minutes, longest 12 minutes of my career. I kept replaying what I had seen, kept trying to rationalize it into something explainable. Moose do not carry people. Bears do not walk upright for sustained distances. Humans do not reach 8 feet tall and wander around in -44-degree weather without protective gear. Every explanation failed against the evidence of my own eyes and calibrated instruments. I landed at 10:15. Chen was waiting on the tarmac, not in the operations building, right there on the pad. That told me everything about how serious this was. He walked to my aircraft before I had even shut down the engine, waited while I completed post-flight, followed me into the hangar. "We need to talk about your report. I know what I saw. 2 heat signatures. 1 human, 1 not. Emily Hartman is alive and being carried northeast toward the White Mountains." Chen closed the hangar door, cut us off from anyone else who might hear. "What you saw was a cow moose with a calf. Thermal imaging can be deceiving in extreme cold. Heat signatures blur. Proportions distort. It happens. I have 8 years flying FLIR systems. I know what moose look like on thermal. That was not a moose. Then it was equipment error. Sensor malfunction. Happens with older systems, especially in extreme temperature. My FLIR was calibrated 2 weeks ago. Every instrument checked out. That footage shows clear bipedal movement carrying a human. Chen looked at me for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, quieter, more personal. David, I am going to explain something once. There are protocols for certain types of sightings in Alaska SAR operations, protocols that are not written down, protocols that exist to protect both searchers and the public from unnecessary panic over misidentified wildlife. That was not wildlife. File the report I am telling you to file. Thermal malfunction, equipment error, negative sighting. Emily Hartman remains missing, presumed deceased from exposure. I have footage, 3 minutes of clear imaging, which you will include in your report as evidence of equipment malfunction. Sensor ghost, false positive. That footage does not leave SAR custody. You are asking me to lie in an official report. I am ordering you to file accurate documentation of equipment failure during search operations. Your thermal system malfunctioned. You misidentified wildlife. You are recommending full system recalibration before next deployment. And if I refuse, then your contract is terminated for equipment reliability concerns and judgment issues during high-stress operations. Your commercial license gets flagged for FAA review, and you never fly SAR missions anywhere in Alaska again, possibly anywhere in the country. The threat hung between us, clear, unambiguous, backed by authority and precedent. I was only beginning to understand. How many times has this happened before? Chen did not answer that question directly. Filed the report. Negative sighting, equipment error. We continue ground search in accessible areas. We do our job. Emily is alive. I saw her moving. We can intercept. No, we cannot. Ground teams do not go into that terrain. Too dangerous. Too remote. And what you think you saw was thermal distortion. I stood there in that hangar, weighing options that all felt wrong. Tell the truth and lose everything I had built in 8 years, or file a false report and maybe keep my career but abandon a living person in the wilderness. Chen must have seen the calculation happening on my face. David, I know this is hard, but think about what you are claiming. You are saying something 8 feet tall is wandering around interior Alaska carrying missing hikers. You know how that sounds. You know what happens if you file that in an official report. I know what I saw. Then you saw equipment failure. File it that way. We search the areas we can access. We do what we can do. Sometimes people do not come home. That is the reality of Alaska SAR. He left me alone in the hangar, left me with a choice that was not really a choice. Truth without career or career without truth. I sat at the computer for 30 minutes before I started typing. Each word felt like a betrayal, each sentence a lie. But I wrote what Chen had ordered. Thermal imaging system experienced intermittent malfunction during search grid pattern at approximately 09 for 7 hours. FLIR display showed false heat signatures inconsistent with known wildlife patterns. Upon closer approach, signatures resolved into sensor ghosts, likely caused by extreme temperature differential between aircraft systems and ambient air. No visual confirmation of missing subject Emily Hartman. Negative sighting. Recommend full FLIR recalibration before next deployment. I attached the 3 minutes of footage. Labeled it, Equipment Malfunction Evidence. Sensor Error Documentation. I made my lie official. The report went into the system at 11:45. By noon, ground search teams had been redirected to areas closer to the original trail. away from where I had tracked Emily, northeast, away from where something had carried her deeper into wilderness. By 2 in the afternoon, I was grounded pending equipment inspection. My helicopter sat in the hangar, while technicians, who already knew what they would find, went through the motions of checking systems that were functioning perfectly. That night, I sat alone in my apartment and watched the thermal footage on my personal backup. 3 minutes, 14 seconds. Over and over. Watching that massive figure carry Emily with care that looked almost gentle. Watching her move her arms. Watching her hold onto something that should not exist. I had found her alive, and I had filed a report saying she was dead, because telling the truth would have cost me everything. 2 days later, Emily Hartman was officially declared deceased, presumed succumbed to exposure and hypothermia on November 17th, body unrecovered due to dangerous terrain and extreme weather conditions. Search suspended. I attended the family notification meeting, watched her parents receive the news, watched them ask if there was any chance she had survived, watched myself lie directly to their faces. And 3 days after that, my contract was terminated anyway. Equipment reliability concerns. Despite the fact that technicians found nothing wrong with my FLIR system, despite perfect maintenance records, despite 8 years of flawless service, Chen had used me to file the false report, then eliminated me so I could not contradict it later. Clean, efficient. Exactly what you would do if you had protocols for covering up impossible sightings. I started flying cargo after that. Freight runs to villages. Supply drops. Half the pay and none of the purpose. But it kept me in the air and gave me time to think about what I had seen and what it cost me to stay silent about it. For 2 years, I carried that weight, that footage, that choice, until the day Emily's sister called and told me something that changed everything. Emily was not dead. She had never been dead. And the thing that saved her was exactly what I had seen on thermal. November 19th started with me watching other pilots launch search patterns I knew were wrong. They flew grids over terrain near the original trail. They checked couloirs and creek beds within 5 miles of where Emily had disappeared. Professional, methodical, completely useless. Because I knew she had been 43 miles northeast of those search areas. I knew something had carried her into country those helicopters would never reach. I knew the entire operation was theater designed to satisfy protocol while avoiding the place she had actually been taken. I sat in the SAR building drinking coffee that tasted like guilt, watched the operations board, watched Chen coordinate teams, watched him move resources away from the White Mountains and toward areas that made families feel like everything possible was being done. My FLIR system sat in the maintenance bay. Technicians crawled over it with the dedication of people who already knew what their report would say. Equipment functioning normally. No evidence of malfunction, pilot error or misidentification. That report would come later, after Emily was declared dead, after the family stopped asking questions, after enough time had passed that contradicting the official narrative would seem like grief-driven conspiracy theory instead of documented fact. I understood the timeline now. I understood how these things worked. You do not fight the cover-up while it is happening. You wait until it is complete. Then you make sure nobody can challenge the official story. By noon on November 19th, ground search teams had covered 12 square miles of terrain, found nothing, because there was nothing to find in those areas. Emily had not died on that trail. She had been carried away from it by something that should not exist, but did. I went home at 1400 hours, told myself I needed rest. Really, I just could not watch the performance anymore. Could not sit there, knowing what I knew, while everyone else operated on the lie I had helped create. That night, I watched the thermal footage again, my personal backup, 3 minutes, 14 seconds that would never see the inside of a courtroom or a news studio. Not while I wanted to keep flying, not while I valued my license over the truth. The figure moved with confidence through terrain that would have slowed a human to a crawl. The way it carried Emily spoke of strength beyond human capacity. The gentleness with which it had set her down and checked on her before continuing suggested intelligence and empathy. I had watched enough FLIR footage to know what predators look like on thermal. This was not predation. This was rescue. Something had found Emily before hypothermia killed her and was taking her somewhere. Somewhere Chen and Alaska SAR did not want ground teams to follow. November 20th brought weather. Heavy snow, winds gusting to 40 knots. The kind of conditions that ground search helicopters and make ground operations dangerous. Chen suspended active search until the weather cleared. Called it a tactical pause. Really, it was an opportunity to let time do what searchers could not. Make Emily's survival mathematically impossible. I spent that day in my apartment doing math I did not want to do. 72 hours in sub-zero temperatures. No shelter. No fire. Inadequate clothing. Every wilderness survival formula said she should have been dead by the end of day 1. Definitely dead by the end of day 2. Impossible to survive to day 3. Which meant either my thermal imaging had been wrong or something had kept her alive. And I knew my thermal imaging had not been wrong. The guilt was not just about the lie I had filed. It was about the rescue I had aborted. If I had followed those signatures for 5 more minutes, I could have locked their exact trajectory, could have calculated probable destination, could have had coordinates accurate enough for ground teams to find her. 5 more minutes. That was all it would have taken. 5 more minutes of career risk in exchange for a precise location. Instead, I had turned around, followed orders, chosen safety. And now Emily was somewhere in the White Mountains with something that carried her there, and nobody was looking in the right place. November 21st arrived with clear skies and colder temperatures, minus 47 degrees Fahrenheit, beautiful and deadly. Perfect visibility for searching and 0 chance of survival for anyone who had been exposed since November 16th. I received a message to report to SAR headquarters. Family meeting. My presence requested as primary search pilot. I drove through Fairbanks, knowing what was coming, knowing what I would have to say, knowing how their faces would look when I delivered the news nobody wants to hear. Emily's parents were already there when I arrived. Richard and Margaret Hartman, late 50s, dressed in clothes that suggested they had flown up from Seattle in a hurry and had not thought about Alaska winter. The kind of people who had probably never imagined their daughter would disappear into wilderness that could kill in hours. Chen handled the introductions, kept it professional, explained that I had been the primary search pilot, that I had covered the most territory, that I had the most complete picture of what the evidence suggested. Margaret looked at me with eyes that were holding on to hope by pure force of will. Is there any chance she is still alive? Any chance at all? I had prepared for this question, had practiced the answer in my mirror that morning. The answer that was technically true, even though it concealed the larger truth. After 5 days of exposure in these temperatures, survival is not medically possible. Hypothermia would have occurred within the first 12 hours. Based on the conditions and the gear she was carrying, Emily likely lost consciousness on the first night and died peacefully in her sleep. The lie came out smooth, confident, backed by meteorological data and survival statistics that were absolutely accurate. Everything I said was true, except for the part where I had seen her alive at the 48-hour mark. Richard asked the question fathers ask when they are trying to hold themselves together. Did she suffer? I looked him in the eyes and lied directly to his face. No, hypothermia causes confusion and drowsiness before unconsciousness. She would have fallen asleep and not woken up. There is no pain in the final stage. She would not have known what was happening. Margaret started crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears that came from accepting the unacceptable. Her daughter was dead and had died alone and cold, and there was nothing anyone could have done differently. Except I could have done something differently. I could have followed those thermal signatures. I could have locked coordinates. I could have given ground teams a chance to reach her before whatever had carried her took her too deep into the wilderness to retrieve. Richard shook my hand, thanked me for everything we had done, thanked me for treating the search with professionalism and dedication, thanked me for being honest with them about what had happened. That gratitude hurt worse than any accusation could have. He was thanking me for lying to him, thanking me for abandoning his daughter while she was still alive, thanking me for choosing my career over her life. They left the SAW building, carrying grief I had helped create, carrying false closure based on a report I knew was fiction, carrying the weight of a daughter they would never bury because there was no body to recover from terrain we were never going to search. At 1600 hours, Emily Hartman was officially declared deceased, presumed succumbed to exposure and hypothermia. Death certificate filed. Search operations suspended. Case closed. Ken had needed my false report to establish the official narrative. Thermal malfunction. Pilot error. Nothing unusual seen. Once that report was filed, I became a liability instead of an asset. Because I knew the truth. I had the footage. I could contradict the story if I ever decided conscience mattered more than career. So they eliminated the problem, terminated the witness, made sure I had every incentive to stay quiet and no platform to speak from if I decided not to. Clean, professional. What you would do if you had been managing this kind of cover-up for years. I started flying cargo in December. Freight runs to villages, building supplies, mail, food. The kind of flying that kept me in the air but took away any authority or credibility I might have had. SAR pilot becomes cargo hauler. That trajectory tells a story about reliability and judgment without anyone having to say a word. My former colleagues stopped returning calls. Word spread through the tight Alaska aviation community. Equipment problems. Questionable decisions. Not someone you wanted in your cockpit or your operation. I did not fight it, did not defend myself, because defending myself meant showing the thermal footage, and showing the thermal footage meant claiming I had seen something impossible, destroying what little career I had left. So I flew freight and kept my mouth shut and watched the footage every night before bed. 3 minutes, 14 seconds on repeat. Watching that figure carry Emily with care that should not exist. Watching her move her arms. Watching proof that everything in the official report was a lie. The math haunted me more than the footage. 5 more minutes of tracking would have given me trajectory certainty within a quarter mile. 10 more minutes would have locked the destination. 15 minutes and I could have had coordinates accurate enough to guide rescuers directly to her. But I had turned around at 3 minutes. Followed orders. Chose career over conscience. And Emily had disappeared into the White Mountains with something that defied explanation, and I had helped make sure nobody would look for her there. I calculated it obsessively, the fuel I'd had remaining, the distance I could have covered, the probability of maintaining sensor contact if I had just ignored Chen and kept following. The math always came out the same. I could have saved her. I chose not to. I made that choice consciously. And for reasons that seemed important at the time but felt hollow in retrospect. For 2 years I carried that weight. 2 years of flying cargo instead of saving lives. 2 years of replaying those 3 minutes. 2 years of knowing I had chosen wrong and that choosing wrong had consequences beyond my career. I told myself the lie every SAR pilot tells themselves eventually. You cannot save everyone. Sometimes people do not come home. Sometimes you do everything you can, and it is not enough. Sometimes the wilderness wins. Except I had not done everything I could. I had done what I was ordered to do. I had followed protocol. I had protected the system, and Emily Hartman had died because of it. At least that is what I believed until October 2025, when Jessica Hartman called me and said 4 words that shattered everything I thought I knew. Emily is alive. October 15th, 2025. Nearly 2 years after I had abandoned Emily Hartman in the wilderness. When the call came through on my satellite phone, unknown number, I almost did not answer. Jessica Hartman, Emily's sister. I need to talk to you about the search. I had not spoken to anyone in the Hartman family since that meeting in November 2023, had not wanted to face them, had not wanted to see the grief I had helped create. I landed in Fort Yukon, unloaded freight, and called her back from the airport office. 3 days ago, my sister called me. Emily, she is alive. The words did not make sense at first. I heard them. I understood the individual meanings, but together they formed a sentence that contradicted everything I knew. Everything the official report said, everything I had told her parents. That is not possible. Emily was declared dead in November 2023. Nobody survives 5 days in that cold. She did not survive it alone. Something found her. Something carried her. Something you saw on thermal imaging before you were ordered to turn around. My hands went cold. How do you know about that? Because Emily told me. She told me everything. About being lost. About the cold. About something finding her in the dark. About being carried for hours through the forest. About waking up in a village 40 miles from where she disappeared. I sat down. The room felt too small. Too hot. My carefully maintained lie was collapsing. Where is she now? Still in the village. White mountains. Remote. No road access. She has been there for 2 years, living with people who protected her, who knew better than to report her survival because they knew what happened to the search. They knew it was called off. They knew someone had decided she was better off missing than found. Why is she calling now? Why wait 2 years? Because she is ready. Ready to tell the truth about what saved her. Ready to expose what Alaskazar did. Ready to make sure it never happens to anyone else. But she needs someone to corroborate her story. Someone who saw it happen. Someone with evidence. I have no evidence. My contract was terminated. My footage was confiscated. She says you have footage. Personal backup. 3 minutes of thermal imaging showing something carrying her northeast. Is that true? I did not answer immediately. Admitting I had kept the footage meant admitting I had been sitting on evidence for 2 years. Evidence that could have brought Emily home. Evidence that could have vindicated her family. Did you see something unusual on November 18th, 2023? Jessica's voice was steady, controlled, the voice of someone who already knew the answer and was giving me a chance to tell the truth. Yes, I saw 2 thermal signatures, one human-sized, one much larger, bipedal, carrying her northeast toward the White Mountains. I reported it. I was ordered to return to base immediately. I was told to file a report saying it was equipment malfunction. So you chose your job over my sister's life. The accusation landed like it should have. Direct, accurate, unforgiving. Yes, I chose wrong. I have lived with that choice for 2 years. She is alive anyway. Despite you. The thing you saw on thermal carried her 8 hours through terrain that should have killed her, delivered her to a village before dawn on November 17th, alive, warm, protected, while you were filing reports saying she was dead. I deserved that, all of it. I made the choice. I knew what I was doing. Emily wants you to tell the truth now. She wants you to release the footage. She wants you to go public with what Alaskazar did. Will you do it? I will lose what is left of my career. I will be blacklisted from aviation. I will face legal consequences for withholding evidence and filing false reports. Yes, you will. But my sister will stop being dead. And whatever saved her will stop being something that has to hide. And maybe the next pilot who sees something impossible will choose differently than you did. What does Emily want me to say? She wants you to say exactly what you saw. She wants you to show the footage. She wants you to explain why you turned around. She wants people to understand that Alaska SAW has protocols for covering up sightings that do not fit their narrative. She wants it to stop. I spent 2 weeks preparing, downloaded the thermal footage from my encrypted backup, pulled my flight logs from November 18, 2023, dug out the false report I had filed, found my personal journal entries from those days. Everything that could corroborate the story I was about to tell. I contacted Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a wildlife biologist at University of Alaska Fairbanks, who had published papers on cryptid sightings and indigenous knowledge. Sent her the footage with no context, asked for analysis. Her report came back 3 days later. Thermal signatures consistent with 2 distinct biological entities. Larger signature shows bipedal locomotion pattern inconsistent with known North American megafauna. Size estimates suggest height of 8 to 8.5 feet, mass of 600 to 800 pounds. Carrying motion analyzed across 47 distinct frames shows coordinated upper limb movement consistent with cradling or supporting secondary object. Secondary signature consistent with adult human female. Core temperature normal. Movement patterns suggest consciousness. Anatomical proportions of primary entity do not match any cataloged species. I contacted Michael Strongbow, an attorney who specialized in whistleblower cases and government transparency. Showed him everything. The footage, the logs, the false report, the orders I had received. His legal opinion was clear. You were ordered to abandon a living person during active rescue operations. That order had no legal foundation. You had no obligation to comply. The termination of your contract and the suppression of evidence constitute actionable misconduct. But prosecution would require the state to acknowledge what you saw was real. They will not do that. They will destroy your credibility instead. I received a package via freight plane. Voice recorder. Note from Jessica. Emily recorded this yesterday. She wants you to hear it before you go public. She wants you to understand what the Guardian did for her. I sat in my apartment that night and listened to Emily Hartman speak for the first time since she had disappeared 2 years earlier. My name is Emily Hartman. On November 16, 2023, I got lost in the White Mountains. I made mistakes. I did not prepare properly. I did not tell anyone my exact route. I did not carry enough gear for the conditions. By the time the sun went down, I was hypothermic and disoriented. I could not feel my hands. I could not think clearly. I knew I was dying. Around midnight, I stopped being able to walk. I sat down against a tree. I thought I would fall asleep and not wake up. I remember thinking that at least it would not hurt, that at least hypothermia was supposed to be peaceful. Then I heard something moving through the trees. Something big. I thought it was a bear. I tried to make myself small, tried to stay quiet, but I was shaking too hard from the cold to be silent. It stepped into the clearing where I was sitting, 8 feet tall, covered in hair, arms that hung almost to its knees, face that looked almost human but not quite, eyes that were intelligent, aware. I should have been terrified, but I was too cold to feel fear. I just sat there shaking while it looked at me. It made a sound, low, resonant, not aggressive, almost questioning, like it was asking if I was hurt. Then it knelt down beside me, slowly, carefully, like it did not want to frighten me. It reached out one hand and touched my face. The hand was warm, impossibly warm. I leaned into that warmth because I was so cold. It picked me up, cradled me like a child, and started walking. I drifted in and out of consciousness for hours. Sometimes I would wake up and feel movement, feel the warmth of its body, keeping me from freezing, feel its arms supporting me like I weighed nothing. Once I woke up and it had stopped. It was sitting down, holding me against its chest, rocking slightly, like it was trying to keep me calm, keep me warm. I could hear its heartbeat, slow, steady, strong. Sometime before dawn on November 17th, it carried me into a village. I remember lights. I remember voices speaking a language I did not understand. I remember being wrapped in blankets. I remember warmth flooding back into my body. The guardian set me down gently in front of the village elder's home. It spoke to the elder, not in English, not in any human language, but they communicated. The elder nodded. The guardian looked at me one more time. Then it walked back into the forest. I learned later that the guardian has been protecting that area for over 60 years, that it has guided lost hunters to safety, that it has left game at the village during hard winters, that the people there know it, respect it, protect its secret the way it protects them. I learned that on November 18th, a helicopter flew over while the guardian was still carrying me, that it deliberately let itself be seen, that it wanted someone to document what was happening, that it wanted proof to exist. I learned that the pilot reported finding me alive, that he was ordered to turn around, that he filed a false report, that the search was called off while I was still alive and being rescued. I stayed in the village because I knew what would happen if I came home. Questions I could not answer. Attention on the guardian. Attention on the village. Scientists. Hunters. People who would not understand. People who would see the guardian as a specimen instead of a person. For 2 years I have lived here. Learned the language. Learned the stories. Learned why the guardian does what it does. Learned what happened to its family in 1952 when federal agents found them. Now I am ready to come home. Ready to tell the truth. Ready to make sure what happened to the guardian's family never happens again. Ready to make sure pilots do not turn around when they find people alive. David, if you are listening to this, I forgive you. You were following orders. You were protecting your career. I understand why you made that choice. But now, I need you to make a different choice. I need you to tell the truth. All of it. No matter what it costs you. The recording ended. I sat in silence for a long time. Then I set up my camera and recorded my own testimony. My name is David Kellerman. I am a helicopter pilot. On November 18th, 2023, I found Emily Hartman alive 48 hours after she disappeared. I watched something impossible carry her through the wilderness. I was ordered to file a false report. I followed that order, and for 2 years I have lived with the choice I made. Today I am releasing the thermal footage that proves Emily was alive. That proves something saved her. That proves Alaska SAR deliberately abandoned a living person because acknowledging her rescue would mean acknowledging something they refuse to admit exists. November 10th, I sent everything to Jessica. The footage, my testimony, the expert analysis, the legal opinion, everything Emily needed to tell her story. November 12th, I received Emily's permission to contact her parents, to tell them their daughter was alive, to explain why I had lied to them 2 years earlier. That phone call was the hardest conversation of my life. Richard Hartman listened in silence while I explained everything. When I finished, he asked one question. Is she safe? Yes, she is safe. And she is coming home when she is ready. Margaret cried. Not grief this time. Relief, confusion, anger, joy. Everything at once. Her daughter, who had been dead for 2 years, was alive. The pilot, who had told them she was dead, had known the truth and stayed silent. I do not expect forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I needed you to hear it from me before it becomes public. Richard's voice was quiet when he spoke again. You made a choice. You chose wrong, but you are choosing right now. That has to count for something. It does not count for Emily's 2 years away from her family. It does not count for your 2 years of grief. But it is all I have to offer. On November 15th, 2025, I uploaded everything. YouTube, Every news outlet, every official channel, the thermal footage, the testimony, Emily's recording, the expert analysis, all of it. Within 6 hours, Alaska SAR was under federal investigation. Within 12 hours, Chen was suspended. Within 24 hours, my story was national news. And somewhere in the White Mountains, a guardian who had saved a life watched as the world finally acknowledged what it had done. Watched as the cover-up collapsed. Watched as one pilot finally chose truth over career. 2 years late, but finally, the truth. November 16, 2025. Exactly 2 years after Emily disappeared. My video had been live for 18 hours. 2 million views. 43 news agencies requesting interviews. Alaska SAR suspended pending federal investigation. Chen placed on administrative leave. And one missed call from a number with a Fairbanks area code, but a satellite routing signature. I called it back. Thomas Whitebear answered. Village elder, White Mountains, Athabaskan. The man who had taken Emily in 2 years earlier. The guardian is dying. If you want to meet him, you need to come now. Today, he has been waiting to see if you would tell the truth. Now that you have, he wants to meet the pilot who finally chose right. I was in the air within 2 hours. Coordinates Thomas provided led me to a location not on any FAA chart. A village of maybe 40 people clustered along a frozen creek drainage, smoke rising from cabin chimneys. Dog teams staked outside. The kind of place that appears on satellite imagery but has no official name because the people there prefer it that way. I landed on a gravel bar a quarter mile from the village. Thomas met me with a snow machine. He was 71 years old but moved like a man 20 years younger. Weather-carved face. Eyes that measured you before deciding if you were worth talking to. Emily is here. The guardian is here. But I need to tell you something before you meet him. Something Emily does not know yet. Something we have been keeping from her because she has already carried enough weight. We rode through spruce forest in silence. Arrived at a cabin larger than the others. Community hall, maybe. Or ceremonial space. Thomas killed the engine. The guardian let your helicopter see him carry in Emily. That was deliberate. He knew the risk. Knew that being documented might bring hunters. Might bring federal agents like the ones who killed his family in 1952. But he let himself be seen anyway because he was already dying. I felt cold that had nothing to do with temperature. What do you mean dying? The cold that night Emily got lost. It was minus 44 degrees. The guardian gave her his warmth for 8 hours. Held her against his body. Kept her core temperature stable while his own dropped. Hypothermia does not care how strong you are. It does not care how adapted you are. 8 hours of sacrificing your heat to save someone else will kill you. Slowly. But it will kill you. He saved her life by giving up his own. He saved her life knowing it would cost him his own. He is the last of his bloodline. The last survivor of what federal agents did in 1952. He has no mate, no children, no family. When he dies, that genetic line ends, and he chose to spend his final warmth on a human who got lost because she did not respect the wilderness enough to prepare properly. We walked into the community hall. Emily was there. She looked different than her missing person photos. Thinner, harder, like 2 years in the interior. Had burned away everything soft and left only what was essential. She saw me and nodded once. Not forgiveness. Acknowledgement. On a bed of furs in the center of the hall lay the guardian. He was smaller than the thermal imaging had suggested. Maybe 7.5 feet. Maybe 600 pounds instead of 800. His fur had grayed around the face and shoulders. His breathing was labored, shallow, but his eyes were clear, intelligent, aware. Thomas spoke in a language I did not understand. The guardian's eyes moved to me, studied me. I felt the weight of that gaze, felt judgment and curiosity in equal measure. He says you are the pilot who saw, the one who turned around, the one who finally told the truth. I knelt beside the bed. I did not know what protocol was for meeting something that should not exist, but clearly did. I defaulted to respect. I am sorry I turned around. I am sorry I waited 2 years. I am sorry your sacrifice almost went unrecorded because I chose my career over doing what was right. The Guardian made a sound, low, resonant, almost like a chuckle. Thomas translated. He says every human chooses wrong the first time. The question is whether you choose right the second time. You did. That is enough. Emily moved closer, sat on the floor beside the bed. The Guardian's hand, massive and weathered, reached out and touched her hair gently. The gesture of a grandfather or a father. Affection without expectation. He is the one who gave me the Athabaskan name Tantan. It means came back from cold. The village has been using it for 2 years. Thomas added context. His name in our language is Naa Hút Sáani, last father. He is the last of his bloodline. The federal agents in 1952 killed his mate and 3 children, killed them for being seen, for leaving footprints near a mining camp, for existing. Why did he save me? Emily's voice was quiet. He knew humans killed his family. Why would he save a human? The Guardian made another sound. Thomas listened, translated carefully. He says his mate told him, before she died, that hate would kill his spirit faster than humans could kill his body. That if he wanted to honor her memory, he should prove that his kind was better than the humans who murdered them. That he should choose mercy when humans chose violence. That he should protect when humans destroyed. So for 60 years he has watched over this territory, guided lost hunters, left game during hard winters, saved the ones who could not save themselves. David, he wants to show you something, but he is very weak. We need to help him stand. It took 4 of us to help the Guardian to his feet. Emily and I supported his weight, while Thomas and another elder steadied him. We walked slowly toward the back of the hall, where a curtain separated a smaller room. Behind the curtain was something I was not prepared for. A wall covered in newspaper clippings, photographs, documents, all related to Bigfoot sightings, all carefully preserved in plastic sleeves. But these were not sensationalized tabloid stories. These were missing person reports, search and rescue documentation, news articles about hikers who disappeared and were never found. Each one had a handwritten note in Athabaskan attached, dates, locations, notes in Thomas's handwriting. These are the ones he saved. Thomas's voice carried weight I had not heard before. 43 people over 60 years. Hunters who got turned around in blizzards. Hikers who broke ankles in country with no cell coverage. A child who wandered from a fish camp in 1987. Everyone delivered safely to a village or a trailhead or close enough to civilization that search teams found them. And every time, protocols buried the truth. Every time, reports called it luck or coincidence or misidentification. Every time, the rescue was covered up to avoid acknowledging what saved them. The Guardian made a longer vocalization, weaker than before. Thomas listened and his face changed. Grief settled into the lines around his eyes. He says this is why he let your helicopter see him. He knew he was dying. Knew this would be his last rescue. Knew that if there was no documentation, his 60 years of saving humans would die with him. That his mate's memory would die with him. That the story of what federal agents did would stay buried. He wanted proof that his kind existed and helped instead of harmed. He wanted you to have a choice about whether to honor that sacrifice or protect the system that murdered his family. He wanted to see if one human would choose truth over convenience. I looked at the wall. 43 names. 43 people who came home because something impossible chose mercy. 43 families who never knew the real reason their loved ones survived. And Emily made 44. The guardian's breathing changed, rougher, more labored. We helped him back to the bed. Emily sat beside him, holding his hand in both of hers. She was crying silently. Thomas spoke quietly. He held on to see if you would come. To see if releasing the truth would bring a pilot who chose right or federal agents who choose wrong. You are here. He can let go now. I do not remember deciding to speak. The words just came. What you did mattered. All 44 lives mattered. Your mate's memory matters. Your children's memory matters. The world will know what was taken from you. The world will know what you gave anyway. I promise you that. I will spend the rest of my life making sure people understand that your kind chose mercy when humans chose murder. The guardian's eyes focused on me one last time. He made a soft sound, almost peaceful. Then his chest stopped moving. The labored breathing ceased. The intelligence behind those eyes faded. Emily pressed her forehead against his hand and sobbed. Thomas began singing in Athabaskan, a death song, ascending. The other elders joined. The sound filled the hall. I stood there watching something impossible die, because it had given everything to save humans who would have destroyed it if they had known what it was. Watching the last of a bloodline end, because federal agents decided 60 years ago that being seen was a death sentence. Watching proof that intelligence and compassion were not uniquely human slip away because one human finally chose to document the truth. We buried him 3 days later. Not in the village cemetery, deeper in the mountains, where his mate and children had been buried after the massacre. Thomas showed me the graves. 4 of them. The mate's was largest. The children's were smaller. All of them had markers carved with symbols I did not recognize. Now there are 5 graves. The last family, the last bloodline, gone because they existed in a world that could not accept what they were. Emily stayed in the village, said she would visit her parents eventually, but could not go back to Seattle, could not go back to a world that would turn her guardian into a research specimen or a tourist attraction. She owed him more than that. I flew back to Fairbanks, carrying weight I would never put down. The thermal footage that had gone viral showed the last act of the last of his kind, showed a being who could have let Emily die, who could have avoided detection, who could have protected himself. Instead he chose to save her, knowing it would kill him, knowing it would expose him, knowing it might bring the same federal agents who murdered his family. He chose mercy anyway. He chose one human life over his own survival. And he chose to let me see it happen, because he wanted at least one human to face the choice he had faced every time he saved someone. Truth or safety. Right or convenient. I chose wrong the first time. I chose right the second time. But the guardian never got a second chance. He died waiting to see if I would honor his sacrifice or bury it. So here is my question for you. If you were the pilot, if you saw something on thermal that should not exist, saving a life at the cost of its own, if telling the truth meant exposing that being to the same violence that killed its family, would you speak, or would you stay silent? Sometimes the truth has a cost we do not see until it is paid. The guardian's name was Naa Hút Sáani. Last father. He saved 44 lives in 60 years. He died making sure at least one human knew his kind chose mercy. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done? Because the next pilot who sees something impossible needs to know the answer before the choice arrives.